Hi, Spiders. I am super excited to be here today with Victoria Roebuck for our Black History Month Spider Spotlight. Victoria is a 2012 graduate of the University of Richmond, where she majored in leadership studies with a minor in business administration. She is also an alumni of the University of Pennsylvania, where she received a Master of Applied Positive Psychology and now works as a positive psychology practitioner, helping people feel more fulfilled in the lives they live and the work that they do. And before entering into the professional world, Victoria was a nationally competitive gymnast and a lacrosse goalie at the University of Richmond, where she finished the 2012 season ranking #1 in the NCAA for total saves and average saves per game. Pretty awesome. And in her free time, you can find her running, hiking, doing yoga, and other activities to help build a stronger mind-body connection. Victoria, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Jade.
Absolutely. So we're going to jump right in. The first question I have for you is, what drew you to the University of Richmond?
Yeah. So there's a few things. The first is just the location. So I grew up in Philly, and I wanted to go somewhere that was, drivable, but far enough from home. So I was looking in sort of the Maryland, DC, Virginia area. Growing up in Philly, I know I wanted to go to a school that was in a city, but also had its own campus life. And so when I walked on the campus of Richmond, I just fell in love with just the mix of being able to get downtown easily, but also kind of, have its own beautiful campus. Obviously, lacrosse worked out. I told myself I wasn't going to go to school just to play lacrosse. I wanted to make sure that even if I didn't play lacrosse, I would be happy at the school. And so Richmond sort of was just a perfect combination of academics. I fell in love with Jepson. I ended up majoring in leadership studies at Jepson, the academics, plus, being able to be recruited for lacrosse as well. It was just a good mix.
Yeah, that's awesome. Shout out to the North. I'm from Jersey, and similar story. I was looking for the same thing. Drivable, but not too close.
Yeah.
So we're on the same page there. I know that you transitioned from gymnastics to lacrosse. So just wanted to talk to you a little bit about how that happened.
Yeah, so I was a gymnast, honestly, from like the time I could walk up through high school. And so it kind of got to the point, when I was in 7th, 8th grade, where I had to start making some tough decisions if I wanted to basically move away and board and like really, really train to, potentially go to the Olympics or, go to the next level.
Yeah.
And I just decided I didn't want that. Gymnastics was a huge part of my life, and it definitely helped shape me into the athlete and person I am today. But I realized that I wanted something different out of my life, and I wanted to have a normal high school and college experience. And so I decided to give up gymnastics. And in high school, I started playing lacrosse. I picked up my first lacrosse stick freshman year of high school, and then just sort of fell in love with it and just kind of unfolded from there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing that with me. I know you talked about some of the things that drew you to Richmond. What was your favorite memory when you were a student athlete here?
My favorite memory. Honestly, I think it was just a lot of the little things, like the downtime, the unstructured time spent in the Robbins Center before and after practice, and like study hall, and just meals in D hall, sitting with other athletes, just sort of like being part of the community family we built. So I don't know if it's like one thing in particular, but sort of all of those like small moments, even like in the training room and just spending time in the locker room and just having that space to like unwind and just like be around, other athletes and the Spider community. It's really special.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know we talk about all the time just the relationships that you're able to build here, whether it's with folks on your team or, other athletes just, hanging around in the Robbins Center. So for sure. I know lacrosse has become increasingly popular, especially where we're from. And there's been a lot of conversations about the lack of diversity in lacrosse. What thoughts, I guess, do you have about how the sport can continue to grow and be more diverse?
Yeah. I mean, it's tough. I mean, it's very clear that, lacrosse has historically been accessible to those that are very affluent in predominantly white institutions, whether that's, white suburbs or private schools. And, as much as lacrosse is becoming like one of the fastest growing team sports, it's also one of the most expensive. And so it really is, there's a pretty heavy financial barrier, pay to play type of model.
Right.
Which really diminishes opportunities for many lower income and even those in cities. And so, I honestly would not have been able to get where I was without the support of scholarships and other donations. I mean, between camps, clinics, training, camps, tournaments, spring break trips, there's a lot of money that goes in, that has to go into, being able to get visibility, on the national level. And so I'm a big fan of organizations like Harlem Lacrosse, which is helping sort of bridge that barrier in New York and Baltimore and Philly and LA and Boston. And so I think the more that, we can create opportunities for it to become more accessible and more lower the financial barriers to get in, the better.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's so important, especially in the conversations we're having today around diversity in sport. So thank you for sharing that. And I guess with some of your experiences being, one of very few Black women to play lacrosse, what kept you grounded during your time as a player?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely hard. At times, I think what kept me grounded was my support network.
Yeah.
And that was other Black athletes. I mean, being the only one on my team, I really turned to other Black athletes at Richmond to build my network and my support system. Other Black friends in the Richmond community. So I think one of my favorite parts of my Richmond experience was going to the multicultural pre-orientation freshman year. So before orientation, I went a few days early, and I just met so many amazing people that became lifelong friends. Yeah. And that really helped me build a community outside of my team and even outside of athletics. And so I think between those, and then of course, just my family, my mom, and just my support system of just being there to help remind me and just help me lean into my authenticity and just show up as me in everything that I do. So it took a village for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. I was actually a pre-O orientation leader as well as a chair during my time here. So absolutely a huge advocate for that program. And happy to hear that you were able to get support from there. So I guess what advice would you give to other athletes of color interested in lacrosse or currently playing in the sport, maybe looking for that same network?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say don't be afraid to find your tribe. You can't in a sport like this, for me, I would have really struggled to survive if I didn't have so many outlets of different types of people that I could go to. I think I absolutely adored my team and loved every minute I was able to spend with them. And I'm also glad that I had opportunities to, hang out with and spend time with other people outside of my team. And I think normally in a traditional sports environment, you spend the majority of your time with your team. And I did. And I think it's just really important to step into your authenticity and know what you need to do to take care of yourself, and put your happiness and your mental health and fitness, front and center. So just don't be afraid to do that, because it's very necessary.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I know we're going to shift gears a little bit here and talk about what you're currently doing. So if you would feel free to share, some of your career, some of the highlights, and what you're doing now.
Yeah. I think one of the things, I mentioned this earlier, one of the things that attracted me to Richmond was Jepson and the leadership program. And after I graduated college, I joined my first job out of college was at a startup. And I fell in love with being able to work at startups. And I think part of that was being an athlete your whole life and being part of a team and a community and building things together. And so I think I just was drawn to this opportunity to learn so much about business in the world through being able to build a company basically from the bottom up. And so since then, I've primarily worked at startups my whole career since I've graduated. And I think one of the things I fell in love with once I got into the corporate world was, how do we bring some of the things you learn from being an athlete into the work environment? In particular, how do we build super diverse teams that have individuals that have different strengths and focus on coaching and developing the individual so that they can become a better employee as a result? And so that sort of took me on a journey to go back and get my master's in positive psychology from Penn. And I now work in an organization called BetterUp, which is one of the fastest growing startups in the world right now, focused on increasing accessibility to give individuals access to a coach that you can meet with to talk about mental fitness, to talk about stress, to talk about leadership development and career and well-being. I think being an athlete, you recognize the importance of having a coach on the field, right? To motivate you, to inspire you, to guide you, to help you become your best version of yourself on the field or court. And that's just as important in everything else that we do in our lives. And so I'm like beyond grateful that I've sort of fallen into this niche and being able to support others through giving them access to one-on-one coaches to develop their own skills and, you know, well-being and mental fitness.
Yeah, that's awesome and really cool. I hear you talk about kind of, when we're here as student athletes, we've got a coach who's kind of guiding us, and the importance of, continuing to have a person or a group of people who are able to support you as you continue to grow professionally as well. I guess what's one of your, biggest takeaways from being a student athlete here? Like, what's one of the lessons that you learned that has helped you in your career now?
So many. I think the first is probably self-efficacy, right? So like you think of the little engine that could. Being an athlete, you come up against barriers, mental walls that you hit, and you learn how much you can get over anything that comes your way. And I think that's a lesson that is also I faced over and over again in my career. Yeah. And so I think just the constant reminder that whatever I face, it's possible to get through. And it's just a matter of how do I sit down and put my mind to it to figure it out. So I think that self-efficacy and sort of the mental fitness piece has been really important. And I think just like focus and time management, right? Like as much as I hated, getting up at 5:30, 6 a.m. for practice and lift and conditioning, it's come in handy as I've gotten older, and there's so much to fit into your day. And I think one of the lessons I've learned, right, everyone has the same 24 hours, right, but it's what you do with your 24 hours that matters. And so I think having so much structure and awareness of what you are capable of fitting into your day was like a huge lesson that, my time at Richmond taught me, that is carried through and made me really more productive and successful in my life now.
Yeah, that's a great point. I know, we've got folks who are getting ready to graduate and no longer, be current student athletes trying to navigate, when do I fit in my lifts? I've got work now. How does that all work together? So I think you bring some great points up there, that it's all about figuring out how you do it. And it might take some time, but we'll definitely eventually get there. And so the last question I have for you, the A10 this month is really focusing on Black health and wellness. And I heard you kind of hint to, mental fitness. What over the past 2 years even have you done to take care of yourself?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned before, I work in the coaching space. So one of the biggest things that I dedicate time to is spending time with my own coach on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, just to prioritize that time for myself. So not only am I making sure I'm working out and eating well and, getting at least 8 hours of sleep every day, but I'm proactively setting aside the time to do some deep inner work on myself.
Yeah.
And, I think it's the last few years have been challenging for a lot of people, and a lot of people in the Black community. And I think it wasn't until recently that I have recognized how much weight and how much pressure I've been unknowingly carrying and putting on myself for so long. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that and start just shedding the layers slowly over time. And so I'm a huge fan of coaching, therapy, getting outside in nature. You read earlier, I love to hike. I just love being outside and going for walks and looking up at the sky and just sort of pausing and just being present as much as possible. Along with, all the small things like journaling and, gratitude, writing gratitude letters. So I really try to incorporate a lot of different things in, so that knowing that I'm going to need kind of different things on a day-to-day, month-to-month, year-to-year basis.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And I guess, as we wrap up, is there a piece of advice or anything that you'd like to share with current student athletes?
Just to enjoy the journey. Everything. One of my favorite quotes is something along the lines of, you can't connect the dots looking forward, you can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to learn to trust in something that the dots of your life moving forward will connect. And when I'm about 10 years out of college now, which is crazy. I'm hitting my 10-year this spring. And I honestly could not be happier with how my life has unfolded. And a big reason is because I personally learned so much in college, both from being a student and an athlete. That just lay such a solid foundation for you to be successful in the world. So just kind of continue to have faith and trust that all of the dots in your future will connect, and just continue to focus on getting to know yourself and lean into your own strengths and authenticity, and just have fun on the journey.
Yeah. The dots of your life will connect in the future. That's going to stick with me for the rest of the day, probably for a really long time. So thank you so much for sharing that, Victoria. This has been awesome. Loved connecting with you. I think you've shared a ton of great tips, and just thank you for sharing your experiences with me today. And we look forward to having you engaged here, and appreciate the work that you're doing. And thank you so much for joining me today.